يقند يعني درن السولي سوال مقارا كراناس مدن أتيتو ووال.
All right, so get this deep dive. It's taking us somewhere fascinating, I gotta say. We're diving deep into the world of Ali Sedqi Azayku, a super prominent Amazigh intellectual, right, from Morocco.
Right.
And I gotta tell you, I'm already hooked.
Well, it's quite the treasure trove you've provided.
Yeah.
Azaiku's story, it's truly captivating. He was like a leading voice, a beacon for the Amazigh people, advocating tirelessly for their language, their culture, their very identity. He even went so far as to challenge, really challenge, those traditional narratives, of Moroccan history.
Oh, challenging official history, huh? No, that's always a recipe for a good story.
You did, I guess.
So, paint me a picture. Who was this Ali Sedqi Azayku, and what made his work so groundbreaking, so different?
Well, picture this. 1942, the heart of the High Atlas Mountains. A region, let me tell you, deeply rooted in Amazigh culture.
Oh, I bet.
And right there, in that setting, Azaiku's journey begins. And even as a young kid, you could see it, this unquenchable thirst for knowledge. He just devoured it, pursued his education relentlessly, moved to Marrakech for school, and eventually became a teacher. But here's the kicker. While he was teaching, he was also simultaneously working towards multiple degrees.
Wow, no kidding. Talk about dedication.
That's our Azayku.
It sounds like he was driven right from the very beginning. What I find amazing is that he didn't just sit back and absorb knowledge. He actively sought to share it, to use it to make a real difference.
Absolutely, 100%. And you see this in his early activism. Picture this. While still a student, mind you, he co-founds the Moroccan Association for Research and Cultural Exchange, AMRAC for short.
AMRAC, got it.
The year is 1967. And their mission, their driving force, well, it was to critically re-examine cultural heritage, to truly champion Amazigh language and culture in all this vibrancy.
So he was already planting those seeds of change even back then. It makes you wonder, what was the social and political climate like back then, for Amazigh people in Morocco? Was this kind of activism met with open arms? Or was there, pushback?
Oh, it was a complex landscape, believe me. There's this story really telling about Azaiku's involvement in a program. It offered, educational support, really crucial support for Amazigh-speaking students. They faced, let's be honest, some real disadvantages.
Yeah.
And these classes, sadly, they were shut down by the authorities.
Oh, wow. No kidding.
Yeah.
That speaks volumes. It suggests there was a definite, a real pushback against anything that, threatened that established order.
Yeah.
Even something as seemingly harmless as educational support.
Absolutely.
It makes his dedication all the more impressive.
It really does. But Azayku, he didn't let those challenges, deter him, stop him. Not a chance. He went on to pursue his doctoral studies in Paris, immersing himself in a whole world of scholarship. And get this, under the mentorship of Jacques Barrick, a leading expert on the Arab world.
So he's deepening his understanding of history and culture on an international stage. Then he returns to Morocco. Did he step back from activism, to focus on his academic career?
No, not at all. He became a professor, yes, at the University of Rabat. But those roots, they ran deep, you see. And one small but powerful detail that always struck me, it was his decision to give his children, those beautiful traditional Amazigh names.
Tilala
and Ziri. A subtle act of defiance almost. Quiet affirmation of his identity in a society that, often sought to erase it.
I love that. It's like he's saying, my culture, it's not something to be hidden away, to be ashamed of. It's a source of pride, a legacy to be passed on. So we see this scholar, this educator, quietly but firmly advocating for his people. When did things, escalate? When did his activism take on a more prominent, a more public stage?
The late 1970s. That's when things really started to shift. In 1979, he co-founds the Amazigh Association alongside Mohammed Shafik and Abdelhamid Zamori. This organization, it was different. It adopted a more explicitly political stance compared to, AMRC. It wasn't just about research and cultural preservation anymore. This was about pushing for concrete, tangible change.
Ah, so the gloves are coming off.
You could say that.
I am guessing this shift in approach, it ruffled some feathers. What was the catalyst, the thing that really put him on the radar of the authorities?
It was a 1981 publication in the Amazigh Journal. It was a piece he'd originally written a few years prior, but when it came out, it really shook things up. In it, he argued passionately for the crucial importance of Amazigh culture in shaping Moroccan history. A direct challenge, some might say, to the prevailing narrative.
Okay, now things are getting interesting. This article, was it like a fiery call to action? What exactly made it so controversial?
It wasn't about inciting, violence or rebellion, Azayku's approach. It was much more, well, intellectual. He meticulously highlighted the contributions, the often overlooked contributions of the Amazigh people to Moroccan history and culture. Contributions, let's be honest, that were often ignored or minimized in those, official accounts.
So it was a challenge rooted in knowledge and scholarship. But I imagine that challenging a nation's, carefully constructed historical narrative, especially one so closely tied to identity, well, that can be perceived as a threat.
Exactly. And remember, this is 1982, a time of, well, heightened political tension in Morocco. For a regime, striving for that that homogenous national identity, Azayku's work, which emphasized a separate cultural narrative, well, it could be seen as undermining that unity.
And that leads us to a pivotal moment in Azayku's life, a moment that, well, that highlights the risks he was willing to take for his beliefs.
It does indeed. 1982, that's when it happened. Azayku was arrested, imprisoned, the charge, endangering state security.
Whoa, hold on a sec. Imprisoned, just for speaking up for cultural recognition. That seems, I don't know, incredibly harsh, don't you think? Was there more to it, or is it really just like a knee-jerk reaction to his ideas?
Well, it really shows you, right, how sensitive, how touchy this whole issue of cultural identity was back then. Azayku, he wasn't calling for like an overthrow of the government or anything like that. But his work, it directly challenged that official narrative, of Moroccan history. And by doing that, it also kind of, questioned the legitimacy of the state's whole idea, their version of national identity.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's about more than just history, isn't it? It's about like the power of history, right? To shape not just how we see the past, but also our vision of, well, of the present, of the future.
Absolutely.
And it seems like Azayku, he got that. He understood that power, and he wasn't afraid to confront it.
Not one bit. And that brings us to another really fascinating side of his work, his poetry. Even facing imprisonment, Azayku, he refused to be silenced. He wrote in Amazigh, the Amazigh language. But here's the thing, he transcribed it in Arabic script, a choice, let me tell you, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I bet. It's like he's bridging those worlds, right? Asserting the presence of Tamazight in a space where it had been, well, kind of pushed aside.
Exactly.
You mentioned he published 2 collections of poetry, right? Timitar and Ismulin. What kind of themes, what ideas did he explore in those works?
His poetry, it goes deep. It delves into longing, that deep longing, the pain, the real pain of marginalization. And that unwavering resilience of the Amazigh spirit. There's this recurring theme, this idea of reclaiming identity, of unearthing those buried histories. And this celebration, this beautiful celebration of that enduring connection to the land.
It's incredible, right, how he takes those personal experiences, those feelings of being silenced, of being marginalized, and weaves them into this broader story, this narrative of cultural survival.
It's powerful stuff.
Is there a particular poem that, that comes to mind, something that really captures the essence of his struggle?
There's this poignant excerpt from Ismulin. It goes, "I wish I could address you, O sun, to give us the news of the heavens. As for the news of the earth, it's painful. I'm like a wolf for those who don't care about me. Whenever I pass, they scream at me. Nothing was left that would tempt me to life. This is the time of departure."
Wow. That's heavy. You can almost feel it, right? That isolation, that sense of being like an outsider in your own land, and that image, that wolf image, that's really striking. It's like he's both wild and free, but also hunted, misunderstood,
Right.
as if he's saying, I refuse to be, tamed, to be put in a box, to conform to a narrative that denies my very existence.
You got it. You nailed it. Azayku's poetry, it wasn't just about expressing personal emotions. It was resistance. Pure and simple, a way of reclaiming his voice and the voice of his people.
And that makes his imprisonment, it makes it even more tragic, doesn't it? They could lock him up, but they couldn't touch his spirit, his creativity.
It's true.
It's a testament to the power of art. It transcends those physical boundaries.
No doubt about it. And even after he was released, Azayku, he never wavered. He remained committed. Absolutely committed to scholarship, to activism. He kept exploring those themes, language, identity, historical memory, not just through poetry, but through his academic work too.
It seems like language, it played a really crucial role in his thinking. What was it about language, would you say, that was so central to his work?
Azayku, he understood.
Yeah.
He understood that language, it's not just a tool for communication. It's deeply, deeply intertwined with culture, with identity, with how we see the world.
Right.
He recognized that the suppression of, of the Amazigh language, it was directly linked to the marginalization of the Amazigh people.
So reclaiming the language, it was about more than just words. It was about reclaiming their history, their identity, their very existence.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about preserving the language in its, in its pure form. It was about using it to challenge those dominant narratives, to tell a different story, a more complete story about Moroccan history.
And this brings us back to that article, that groundbreaking article he published in '81, where he argued for the significance of Amazigh culture in Moroccan history, challenging that prevailing narrative, the one that often minimized or even completely erased those contributions. It's like he's saying, we're not just a footnote, an afterthought in Moroccan history. We're an integral part of it.
A vital thread in the tapestry.
It makes you think about, about how history is written, who gets to tell the story, and whose voices are left out.
It's a crucial question.
Azayku is pushing back, right? Pushing back against a historical narrative that had been constructed without the input, without the recognition of the Amazigh people.
100%. He was shining a light on those biases, those inherent biases in those narratives. He critiqued, both colonial European historians and those Arab-centric historians for failing to capture the richness, the complexity of Moroccan history.
Could you give us some concrete examples of those biases? What were those blind spots in those historical narratives?
Well, colonial historians, they were focused, often obsessed with domination, with exploitation.
Yeah.
They often depicted Amazigh people as backward, as primitive.
Oh, wow.
Almost to justify their colonization.
Right.
And they tended to focus on, urban centers, the ruling elites, and they completely overlooked the vibrant culture, the rich history of those rural Amazigh communities.
It's classic, isn't it? A classic colonial tactic. You diminish, you downplay the culture and history of the colonized people to make your own power seem legitimate.
Exactly.
But what about the Arab-centric narratives? How did they contribute to the marginalization of the Amazigh people?
Well, the heavy focus on the spread of Islam and the Arabization of North Africa, it often led to this portrayal, this image of Amazigh culture as somehow unimportant, a relic of the past.
Right.
And there was this underlying assumption that Arab culture was the dominant force.
Right.
And everything else was just, absorbed, assimilated.
So it's a form of cultural erasure, right? Where diversity is kind of flattened, smoothed over in the name of this unified national identity. It's like saying to be truly Moroccan, you have to conform to this one specific cultural model. And that, of course, leaves out a huge chunk of the population, doesn't it? Their history, their traditions.
Exactly. And that erasure, that silencing, it has real consequences.
Yeah.
It affects everything from language policy to education to representation in the media and the arts. It creates this feeling of invisibility, like your culture, your history doesn't matter.
And this is what he was fighting against. He was reclaiming that history. Yeah. He was asserting the undeniable value of Amazigh culture, and he was demanding that it be recognized as an integral part of that Moroccan mosaic.
He was.
It's such an important message, isn't it? This idea of reclaiming your narrative, of refusing to be defined by those who want to erase you, to diminish you.
It's powerful.
It resonates with so many marginalized communities all over the world. Those who are fighting for recognition, for the right to tell their own stories in their own words.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Azayku, he didn't just talk about it. He lived it. He embodied that resistance through his actions, through his writing, through his unwavering commitment to the Amazigh cause.
It's inspiring to see how he used language, right, as this tool, this powerful tool for both cultural preservation and political resistance. So he wasn't just, lamenting the loss. He was actively fighting against it, using his words to build, to create a different future.
It's a more inclusive future.
Yes.
He understood inherently that language, identity, and the land, they're inseparable. They're all part of this holistic worldview that had been disrupted, fragmented by colonialism, by cultural erasure.
It's tragic to think about those generations of Amazigh people who were denied access to their language, their culture, their history. But Azayku's work, it offers this glimmer of hope, doesn't it? This reminder that even in the face of oppression, the human spirit can find a way to resist, to reclaim what was lost.
It does. He truly believed, that by reclaiming their heritage, the Amazigh people, they could heal those wounds and forge a new path forward.
Yeah.
One that embraced both their unique, their vibrant cultural identity, and their place within that larger Moroccan society.
It's a powerful vision, and one that continues to inspire even today. His story reminds us that even facing, those seemingly impossible obstacles, one person's dedication, their passion, it can make a difference. It can change the world.
It can. It really can.
It's amazing how he used language, isn't it? Not just to preserve culture, but to resist, to fight back.
It was a weapon in a way, a powerful one.
He wasn't just lamenting the loss. He was actively working to change the narrative, to build something new.
He was a builder, a visionary.
It makes you wonder, what Azayku would think about the state of Amazigh culture today in Morocco. He dedicated his life to this, to seeing it recognized, celebrated, not just tolerated, but embraced as like a fundamental part of Moroccan identity.
It's a poignant question, isn't it? Especially considering when he passed away. Azayku died in 2004. Just as some of those changes he fought so hard for were starting to happen.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, 2004. That same year, Tamazight, it was introduced into the Moroccan education system. And a few years before that, in 2001, the Royal Institute of Amazigh Culture was established.
Yorkham.
Exactly. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How he might have felt seeing those milestones, those achievements.
It's bittersweet for sure. He didn't get to see the full, blossoming of his efforts, but his fingerprints, they're all over these advancements. It speaks to the lasting impact, the power of his vision, of his dedication.
His influence, it's undeniable. He inspired generations of activists, of scholars, and his work, it directly contributed to these shifts, these changes in policy and perception. He forced people to confront, those uncomfortable truths about their history and to acknowledge the value of diversity, of inclusion.
Going through all these sources, it struck me that Azayku's story, it's bigger than just one man, or one culture, or even one country. It resonates on this much deeper level.
I couldn't agree more. It's about that universal human desire for recognition, for belonging, for the right to claim your own narrative. It's about the power of language to shape identity, the importance of reclaiming history from the margins.
Exactly. It challenges us, doesn't it, to look beyond those official narratives, to seek out those silenced voices, those untold stories that enrich our understanding of the world.
Absolutely.
This idea that history isn't just, facts and dates. It's a tapestry woven from multiple perspectives, multiple experiences. And by silencing those voices, by erasing those experiences, we create this distorted, this incomplete picture of the past.
Exactly. And those distortions, those gaps, they have real consequences. They perpetuate inequalities, they reinforce prejudices, and they prevent us from really truly understanding who we are
as individuals,
as a society, as a whole.
So where do we go from here? How do we make sure those silenced voices are heard? How do we bring those untold stories to light?
I think Azayku's life, his work, they offer us a kind of a roadmap, He showed us the power of scholarship, of activism, of art, to challenge the status quo, to push for change. He showed us how important it is to question assumptions, to dig deeper, to seek out those alternative narratives that have been, pushed aside, marginalized.
It comes down to being more critical, more curious.
Yes.
We have to be willing to confront our own biases, to acknowledge the limitations of what we know, and to actively seek out perspectives that are different from our own.
That curiosity, that willingness to engage, that's what fuels true understanding. And ultimately, that's what leads to a more just, a more equitable world.
Well, I think we've done Ali Sedqi Azayku justice with this deep dive. It's been incredible exploring his life, his work, the lasting power of his ideas.
It has. His story, it's a reminder that even in the face of real adversity, one person's passion, their dedication, it can have a profound impact.
I hope this deep dive has inspired you, to explore Azayku's work, to seek out those hidden histories, those untold stories that are just waiting to be discovered. And on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought from Azayku himself. To understand the present, we must unearth the past. And to build a better future, we must embrace the richness, the complexity of our shared history.
Beautiful. And with that, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the life and legacy of Ali Sedqi Azayku.